Sarah Mitchell clutched her 2-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, closer to her chest as the rain pounded against the broken windshield of her old Honda. The car had finally given up on the desolate mountain road, steam rising from the engine like ghostly fingers in the cold October night. Her phone showed no signal, and the nearest town was miles behind them. "Mama, I'm scared," Emma whispered, her small hand gripping Sarah's jacket. Ethan had fallen asleep despite the thunder, his tiny body pressed against his sister for warmth. Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. 3 months ago, she had been living a comfortable life in Denver with her husband Marcus and their twins. Then came the diagnosis. Marcus had been battling cancer for 2 years, and the medical bills had drained their savings. When he passed away last month, Sarah discovered the crushing debt he had hidden from her. The bank had foreclosed on their house, and Child Services was threatening to separate her from her children due to her inability to provide stable housing. She had packed everything they owned into the Honda and driven aimlessly, hoping to find somewhere, anywhere, that could offer them a fresh start. Now, stranded on this mountain road with only $47 to her name and 2 hungry children, Sarah felt the weight of complete desperation. Through the rain-blurred windshield, she spotted a faint light in the distance. It appeared to be coming from a massive structure perched on a rocky outcrop above the tree line. Sarah knew she had no choice. She wrapped the twins in her jacket, grabbed their small bag of belongings, and began the treacherous walk up the winding path toward the light. The building that emerged from the darkness was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was a genuine castle, complete with stone towers, arched windows, and massive wooden doors that looked like they belonged in medieval times. Gothic architecture dominated every detail, from the flying buttresses to the ornate gargoyles that seemed to watch her approach. Warm light glowed from several windows, suggesting someone actually lived in this extraordinary place. Sarah hesitated at the enormous front doors, her heart pounding. What kind of person lived in a castle on a remote mountain? But Emma was shivering violently, and Ethan had developed a concerning cough. She had to try. The brass knocker was shaped like a wolf's head, heavy and cold under her trembling fingers. The sound it made when she lifted and dropped it echoed ominously through the night. For several minutes, nothing happened. Sarah was about to knock again when she heard the sound of multiple locks being turned from inside. The door opened to reveal a man who took Sarah's breath away. He stood at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulder-length black hair and the most striking pale blue eyes she had ever seen. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing an expensive-looking black suit that fit his lean, muscular frame perfectly. His features were sharp and aristocratic, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline. Despite his undeniable attractiveness, there was something almost otherworldly about his appearance. "Please," Sarah said, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "My car broke down on the road below. My children are cold and hungry. I know this is strange, but could you possibly help us? We have nowhere else to go." The man's piercing gaze moved from Sarah to the twins in her arms, and something in his expression softened. "You're soaked through," he said, his voice deep with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Come inside immediately." He stepped back and gestured for them to enter. The interior of the castle was even more impressive than the exterior. The entrance hall featured soaring ceilings, tapestries depicting medieval scenes, and a grand staircase with ornate wrought iron railings. Everything was impeccably maintained and elegantly furnished, yet it had an old-world charm that felt authentic rather than pretentious. "I'm Adrian Blackthorne," the man said as he closed the heavy door behind them. "And you are?" "Sarah Mitchell. These are my twins, Emma and Ethan." Sarah's teeth were chattering now that she was inside the warm castle. Adrian studied them for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're all hypothermic. We need to get you warm immediately." He called out in a language Sarah didn't recognize, and, within moments, a middle-aged woman appeared from a side corridor. "This is Mrs. Rosenberg, my housekeeper," Adrian explained. "She'll help you get cleaned up and find dry clothes while I arrange for some hot food." Mrs. Rosenberg was a kind-faced woman with graying hair and warm brown eyes. She immediately took charge, leading Sarah and the twins up the grand staircase to a beautiful guest room with a fireplace that was already crackling with warmth. The room was decorated in rich burgundy and gold, with antique furniture and oil paintings of landscapes. Poor dears, Mrs. Rosenberg murmured as she helped Sarah remove the twins' wet clothes. Mr. Blackthorne has already asked me to prepare some soup and hot chocolate. Let's get these little ones into a warm bath first. The bathroom adjoining the guest room was like something from a luxury hotel, with a deep clawfoot tub and fluffy white towels. As Mrs. Rosenberg filled the tub with warm water, Sarah found herself wondering about their mysterious host. The castle was clearly worth millions, and Adrian Blackthorne carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to wealth and authority. Yet he had opened his door to complete strangers without hesitation. After the twins were bathed and dressed in soft pajamas that Mrs. Rosenberg had somehow procured in their exact sizes, they were led to a smaller, cozier room that Adrian called the family dining room. A fire blazed in the hearth, and the table was set with elegant china and crystal glasses. Adrian had changed from his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater, which somehow made him even more attractive. "I hope chicken soup and grilled cheese sandwiches are acceptable," he said as Mrs. Rosenberg began serving the meal. "I thought the children might prefer something familiar." Emma and Ethan, who had been unusually quiet since entering the castle, began to relax as they ate the warm food. Emma even smiled when Adrian asked her about her favorite colors, and Ethan giggled when Adrian made silly faces at him across the table. "This is incredibly kind of you," Sarah said, feeling overwhelmed by their host's generosity. "I don't know how to thank you." "We'll leave first thing in the morning, I promise." Adrian set down his wineglass and looked at her directly. "Where will you go?" The simple question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had no answer. "We'll figure something out." "Sarah," Adrian said gently, "it's none of my business, but it's obvious you're running from something. You don't have to tell me what, but I want you to know that you and your children are safe here for as long as you need to stay." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her genuine kindness without expecting something in return. "I can't accept charity. I don't have money to pay you, and I won't take advantage of your generosity." "Who said anything about charity?" Adrian replied with a slight smile. "This castle is enormous, and Mrs. Rosenberg has been complaining for years that it's too much work for one person. Perhaps we could work out an arrangement." Mrs. Rosenberg nodded enthusiastically. "Oh yes, Mr. Blackthorne. I've been saying we need help with the household management. And it would be wonderful to have children's laughter in these halls again." Sarah looked around the elegant room, then at her twins who were happily finishing their hot chocolate. For the first time in months, she felt a tiny spark of hope. "What kind of arrangement did you have in mind?" "We can discuss the details tomorrow," Adrian said. "Tonight, you all need rest. Mrs. Rosenberg has prepared rooms for you." As they were led back upstairs, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their arrival at this castle was more than just a fortunate coincidence. There was something about Adrian Blackthorne that intrigued her beyond his obvious wealth and generosity. The way he moved with such fluid grace, the intensity of his gaze, and the fact that he lived alone in a medieval castle on a remote mountain, it all seemed like something from a fairy tale. The guest room Mrs. Rosenberg had prepared for them was actually a suite with a large bedroom for Sarah and a connecting room with twin beds for Emma and Ethan. Everything was luxurious yet comfortable, from the silk curtains to the down comforters. Sarah tucked her children into their beds and kissed them goodnight, marveling at how quickly they had adapted to their new surroundings. As she prepared for bed in the main room, Sarah found herself drawn to the tall windows that offered a view of the moonlit mountains. The storm had passed, and the night was now clear and starlit. She wondered about the man who had opened his home to them so readily. Adrian Blackthorne was clearly wealthy, cultured, and generous, but there was an air of mystery about him that was both intriguing and slightly unsettling. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Adrian standing in the hallway, holding a cup of tea. "I thought you might have trouble sleeping," he said, offering her the cup. "It's chamomile with honey. Mrs. Rosenberg swears by it." "Thank you," Sarah said, accepting the warm cup gratefully. "Mr. Blackthorne, I want you to know how much this means to us. When my car broke down tonight, I honestly didn't know what we were going to do. Please, call me Adrian. And you don't need to explain anything unless you want to." Sarah found herself wanting to tell him everything. There was something about his calm presence that made her feel safe for the first time in months. My husband died last month. Cancer. The medical bills and funeral costs left us with nothing. We lost our house, and I couldn't find work that would pay enough to support the three of us. Child Services was threatening to take Emma and Ethan away from me. Adrian's expression darkened. They wanted to separate you from your children because you're struggling financially? They said I couldn't provide stable housing or adequate care. I knew if I stayed in Denver, I would lose them. So I packed up everything we had and just started driving, hoping to find somewhere we could start over. That was very brave, Adrian said quietly. Running away to protect your children took tremendous courage. Or tremendous stupidity, Sarah replied with a bitter laugh. I had no plan, no destination. I was just running. Sometimes running is the smartest thing we can do, Adrian said, and Sarah sensed he was speaking from personal experience. The important thing is that you kept your family together. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, Sarah sipping the soothing tea while Adrian seemed lost in thought. Adrian, Sarah said finally, why are you helping us? You don't know anything about me. For all you know, I could be dangerous. He smiled slightly at that. You're a mother who would do anything to protect her children. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Besides, this castle has been too quiet for too long. It needs the sound of children's laughter again. Again? Sarah asked, curious about his choice of words. Adrian's expression became guarded. It's late. You should get some rest. We can talk more tomorrow about the work arrangement I mentioned. After he left, Sarah lay in the comfortable bed staring at the ceiling. Every instinct told her she could trust Adrian Blackthorne, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something significant. The way he had phrased certain things, the mysterious accent, the fact that he lived alone in such an isolated place, it all added up to a man with secrets. But, as she listened to the peaceful sound of her children breathing in the next room, Sarah realized that for the first time in months, she felt safe. Whatever Adrian's secrets might be, he had shown them more kindness in one evening than they had received from anyone since Marcus's death. Tomorrow, she would find out what kind of work arrangement he had in mind. Tonight, she would simply be grateful that they had found shelter from the storm in more ways than one. The castle settled around them with soft creaks and sighs, as if the ancient building itself was welcoming them home. Sarah closed her eyes and, for the first time in weeks, fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, unaware that her arrival at Blackthorn Castle would change all their lives in ways she could never have imagined. Sarah woke to the sound of her children's laughter echoing through the castle halls. For a moment, she was disoriented, then remembered where they were. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of their guest suite, and she could hear Emma and Ethan chattering excitedly about something in the next room. She quickly dressed and found her twins sitting at a small table by the window in their room, enjoying what appeared to be a feast. Mrs. Rosenberg was with them, smiling as she poured orange juice into child-sized crystal glasses. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Rosenberg said warmly. "I hope you don't mind that I brought the children breakfast. They were awake early, and I thought you could use the extra sleep." "You're too kind," Sarah said, still marveling at the elaborate breakfast spread. Fresh fruit, fluffy pancakes, scrambled eggs, and what looked like homemade pastries filled the table. "This is far more than necessary." "Nonsense. Mr. Blackthorne specifically requested that the children have whatever they wanted. He's already gone into the village this morning to arrange for your car to be towed and repaired." Sarah felt a pang of guilt. "I should have gone with him. I don't even know what's wrong with it, and I certainly can't afford expensive repairs." "He said not to worry about the cost," Mrs. Rosenberg replied. "He wants to discuss the work arrangement with you this morning. He's asked me to show you around the castle so you can understand what the position would involve." After breakfast, Sarah left Emma and Ethan in Mrs. Rosenberg's capable care while she toured the castle. The place was even more impressive in daylight than it had appeared the night before. There were dozens of rooms spread across 3 floors, including a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a music room with a grand piano, several sitting rooms, and a formal dining room that could easily seat 20 people. Mr. Blackthorne inherited this castle from his family, Mrs. Rosenberg explained as they walked through an art gallery filled with paintings that looked like museum pieces. He's been living here for about 8 years now, but he travels frequently for business. When he's away, it's just me maintaining this enormous place. What kind of business is he in? Sarah asked, studying a particularly striking portrait of a dark-haired man who bore a strong resemblance to Adrian. Import and export, I believe. Art, antiques, rare books. He has connections all over Europe. Mrs. Rosenberg's tone suggested she didn't know much more than that about her employer's work. They continued the tour, visiting a modern kitchen that had been seamlessly integrated into the castle's medieval architecture, several guest bedrooms, and Adrian's private study. The study was off-limits, Mrs. Rosenberg explained, but Sarah caught a glimpse of dark wood paneling, more books, and what appeared to be very old maps hanging on the walls. The position would involve general household management, Mrs. Rosenberg said as they made their way back downstairs. Coordinating with the cleaning service, managing schedules, handling correspondence, that sort of thing. Mr. Blackthorne also entertains occasionally, so there would be event planning involved. It sounds like far more responsibility than someone with my background should handle, Sarah said honestly. I was a dental hygienist before the twins were born, and then I was a stay-at-home mom. I don't have experience managing a household staff or planning events. But you have something more valuable than experience, dear. You have good judgment and a caring nature. Mr. Blackthorne values those qualities above formal credentials. They found Adrian in the family dining room, reading what appeared to be financial reports while drinking coffee from an elegant china cup. He looked up as they entered, and Sarah felt that same flutter of attraction she had experienced the night before. In the daylight streaming through the tall windows, his pale blue eyes seemed even more striking against his dark hair. Good morning, Sarah. I hope you slept well. Very well, thank you. Mrs. Rosenberg said you've arranged to have my car repaired. You really didn't need to do that. It's not a problem. The mechanic in the village is a friend of mine. He'll have it running properly again. Adrian gestured for her to sit across from him. Mrs. Rosenberg has shown you around? She has. This place is incredible, Adrian. But, I have to be honest, the position you're offering sounds far more complex than anything I'm qualified to handle. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Let me tell you what I really need, Sarah. This castle has been in my family for generations, but it's always felt more like a museum than a home. Mrs. Rosenberg does excellent work, but she's one person trying to manage a property that was designed to house dozens of people. More importantly, I travel extensively for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. The castle feels empty when I'm away. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Last night, when I heard your children laughing over dinner, I realized what this place has been missing. It needs life, warmth, the energy that only a family can provide. Yes, there would be practical duties involved in the position, but what I'm really offering you is a home. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. You barely know us. I know enough. You're a devoted mother who gave up everything to protect her children. You're honest about your limitations but brave enough to try new things. And your children are remarkable, polite, intelligent, and full of joy despite everything they've been through. What would the living arrangements be? Sarah asked, trying to focus on practical matters. There's a wing on the second floor that would be perfect for your family. 3 bedrooms, a private sitting room, and a kitchenette if you prefer to prepare your own meals sometimes. Complete privacy, but access to the rest of the castle whenever you want. Mrs. Rosenberg nodded enthusiastically. It's a beautiful suite, dear. It has its own fireplace and lovely views of the mountains. And compensation? Sarah asked, still hardly believing this conversation was real. Room and board, of course, plus a salary that should be more than adequate for your needs. Health insurance, education expenses for the children, and a generous vacation allowance. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer. It seemed too good to be true, which made her cautious. Adrian, why are you doing this? Really? His expression became serious. Have you ever felt like you were living a half-life, Sarah? Going through the motions but never really connecting with the world around you? Sarah thought about the months before Marcus's death, when she had been so focused on his illness and their financial struggles that she had stopped seeing beauty in anything. Yes, I have. That's how I've been living for years. This castle, my business, even my relationship with Mrs. Rosenberg, everything felt distant, like I was observing my own life from the outside. But, last night, sitting around the dinner table with your family, I felt present in my own life for the first time in longer than I can remember. There was something deeply sad in his voice that made Sarah want to reach across the table and take his hand. Instead, she said, that's a lot of pressure to put on strangers. What if we disappoint you? You won't, Adrian said with quiet certainty. But, if for any reason the arrangement doesn't work out, I'll make sure you have enough resources to establish yourselves wherever you want to go. You're not trapped here, Sarah. This is a choice, not a sentence. Mrs. Rosenberg excused herself to check on the children, leaving Sarah and Adrian alone. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Sarah found herself studying Adrian's face, trying to understand the contradiction she sensed in him. He was clearly successful and sophisticated, yet there was a loneliness in his eyes that reminded her of her own grief. Can I ask you something personal? Sarah said finally. Of course. Have you ever been married? Had a family? Adrian's expression darkened, and, for a moment Sarah regretted asking. I was engaged once, many years ago. It didn't work out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's a reasonable question, considering what I'm proposing. Adrian stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The truth is, Sarah, I've lived a very isolated life. My business requires a lot of travel, and I've never been good at maintaining close relationships. But I'm tired of being alone. So you're offering my children and me a home because you're lonely? Sarah asked, not unkindly. Adrian turned back to her. I'm offering you a home because you need one, and because I think we could help each other. Your children would have stability, excellent education opportunities, and a safe environment to grow up in. You would have meaningful work and financial security. And I would have the privilege of watching Emma and Ethan discover all the wonders this castle has to offer. Sarah thought about her alternatives. She had less than $40 left, no job prospects, and no family to turn to. But, more than that, she thought about the genuine kindness Adrian and Mrs. Rosenberg had shown them, and the way her children had already begun to bloom in this nurturing environment. What about dating? She asked, surprising herself with the question. I mean, eventually I might want to. I don't want to assume that because you're providing housing, you have any claim on my personal life. Adrian's eyes flashed with something she couldn't interpret. Your personal life is entirely your own, Sarah. If you choose to date someone, bring them here. If you fall in love and want to marry again, we'll figure out how to accommodate that. I'm not looking for a romantic arrangement. Something in his tone suggested there was more to that statement than he was saying, but Sarah didn't press. What about friends? I don't want Emma and Ethan growing up completely isolated. There are several families with children in the village below. The school there is excellent, small but well-funded. The children would have plenty of opportunities to make friends. Sarah realized she was running out of objections. Every practical concern she raised, Adrian had a reasonable answer for. The truth was, the offer was better than anything she could have hoped for even before Marcus got sick. I need some time to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take as long as you need. They were interrupted by the sound of children's laughter and running footsteps. Emma and Ethan burst into the dining room, followed by a slightly breathless Mrs. Rosenberg. Mama! Mama! Emma called excitedly. Mrs. Rosenberg showed us the music room, and there's a piano bigger than our whole apartment. And there's a library with a ladder that rolls along the walls. And there's suits of armor. Ethan added, his eyes wide with wonder. Real armor like knights used to wear. Sarah looked at her children's bright, excited faces and felt her heart clench. They had been through so much trauma and uncertainty over the past few months, but already they seemed more like their old selves than they had since Marcus's diagnosis. "Did you thank Mrs. Rosenberg for showing you around?" Sarah asked. "Yes, Mama," they chorused. "Actually," Adrian said, crouching down to their eye level, "I was hoping you might help me with something. I have a problem that I think you two might be able to solve." Emma and Ethan immediately gave him their full attention. Sarah marveled at how naturally he interacted with them, without the awkwardness many childless adults displayed around young children. "You see, this castle has many rooms, but some of them haven't been used in a very long time. I think they're lonely. They need people to play in them and laugh in them and make them feel useful again. Do you think you could help with that?" "Yes," both children said immediately. "But that's a very big job. It might take a long time, maybe even years. Would you be willing to live here while you work on making the lonely rooms happy again?" Emma looked at Ethan, then at Sarah, then back at Adrian. "Would we live here with Mama?" "Absolutely. I wouldn't dream of separating a family." "And could we explore the whole castle?" Ethan asked. "Every room except my private study. That room has important business papers that could be damaged if they get mixed up." Sarah watched this exchange with growing amazement. Adrian was essentially offering them a fairy tale life, and he was doing it in a way that made her children feel important and needed rather than like charity cases. "Emma, Ethan," Sarah said gently, "why don't you go with Mrs. Rosenberg and wash up for lunch? I need to talk with Mr. Blackthorne a little longer." After the children left, Sarah turned back to Adrian. "You're very good with them. They're exceptional children, Sarah. They've been through trauma that would break many adults, but they still have that wonderful capacity for joy that children possess. They deserve every good thing life can offer." "So do you," Sarah said quietly. "You deserve more than just observing someone else's happiness from the sidelines." Adrian's expression became guarded again. "Perhaps. But, for now, this arrangement would give me more happiness than I've had in years." Sarah made her decision. "All right. We'll try it. But I want us to review the situation in 6 months. If it's not working for any of us, we'll discuss alternatives." "Agreed." Adrian's smile was the first completely unguarded expression she had seen from him. "Welcome home, Sarah." That afternoon, Adrian drove them down to the village to retrieve Sarah's belongings from her car and to let the children see their new community. The village was charming, with stone houses, flower boxes, and friendly people who all seemed to know Adrian well. The school principal, Mrs. Chen, was delighted to meet Emma and Ethan and assured Sarah that they would have no trouble integrating into their programs. As they walked through the village square, Sarah noticed the way people looked at Adrian with a mixture of respect and something that might have been unease. When she mentioned it to Mrs. Rosenberg later, the older woman just said that small communities always had their share of gossips, and Adrian's wealthy, private lifestyle made him a subject of speculation. Their first week at the castle passed in a blur of exploration and settling in. Emma and Ethan took to their new home like they had been born there, treating the whole place as their personal adventure playground. Sarah began learning her new responsibilities, which were extensive but not overwhelming. Adrian was patient and supportive, always available to answer questions but never micromanaging her decisions. The more time Sarah spent around Adrian, the more intrigued she became by him. He was clearly well-educated and cultured, speaking several languages fluently and displaying an impressive knowledge of art, literature, and history. But there were odd gaps in his knowledge. He seemed unfamiliar with recent movies or music, and sometimes made references to historical events as if he had personally witnessed them. He was also remarkably strong and graceful for someone who claimed to spend most of his time doing business work. Sarah had seen him effortlessly lift furniture that should have required 2 people, and he moved with the fluid precision of a trained athlete or dancer. His skin was always pale despite spending time outdoors, and she had never seen him eat during daylight hours, though he was always present for dinner. Most puzzling of all were the phone calls he received at odd hours, always conducted in languages she didn't recognize, and always seeming to put him in a dark mood afterward. When she asked Mrs. Rosenberg about Adrian's business, the housekeeper's answers were vague and seemed deliberately evasive. But, despite the mysteries surrounding her new employer, Sarah felt safer and happier than she had in months. Emma and Ethan were thriving, making friends at school and coming home each day with new stories about their castle adventures. Adrian was patient and kind with them, often joining them for dinner and listening to their chatter about their day with genuine interest. It was during their second week at the castle that Sarah first noticed something truly strange about Adrian Blackthorne. She had gotten up in the middle of the night to check on Emma, who had been fighting a cold, and decided to go down to the kitchen for some warm milk to help her get back to sleep. As she descended the grand staircase, she noticed light coming from the library. Assuming Adrian was having trouble sleeping and had decided to read, she thought about joining him. They had fallen into an easy friendship, and she enjoyed their conversations about books and art. But, as she approached the library doors, she heard Adrian's voice speaking in that unfamiliar language again, his tone urgent and commanding. Through the crack between the doors, she could see him pacing back and forth, but there was no one else in the room. He appeared to be having an intense conversation with empty air. Sarah backed away quietly, her heart racing. Either Adrian was having some kind of mental health episode, or there was something very strange going on in the castle. As she returned to her room with questions swirling in her mind, she made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she was going to start paying much closer attention to the mystery of Adrian Blackthorne. Sarah spent the next few days carefully observing Adrian's behavior, and what she discovered only deepened the mystery. He never ate breakfast or lunch when she was around, claiming he preferred to take his meals early or late when he wouldn't be interrupted by business calls. She never saw him in direct sunlight, despite the castle having numerous sun-filled rooms that he seemed to avoid during peak daylight hours. And twice more she heard him having those strange one-sided conversations in his study late at night. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening when Emma came down with a fever. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing cool compresses when she overheard Adrian on the phone in his study, this time speaking English. "I understand your concerns about the family living here," he was saying, his voice tense. "But I've made my decision. Sarah and the children are under my protection now." There was a pause, then Adrian's voice turned cold and commanding in a way Sarah had never heard before. "Do not mistake my recent contentment for weakness, Marcus. I am still exactly what I have always been, and anyone who threatens what is mine will discover that very quickly." Sarah's blood ran cold. Marcus was her dead husband's name. But that was impossible. Marcus had been cremated over a month ago. Who was Adrian talking to? "Yes, I know the risks," Adrian continued. "But I will not send them away. For the first time in centuries, I feel alive. If the council disapproves, they can take their concerns up with me directly." Centuries? Sarah's rational mind rejected what she was hearing, but the pieces were starting to form a pattern that was both impossible and undeniable. Adrian's pale skin, his avoidance of daylight, his impossible strength, the way he moved with inhuman grace, his archaic speech patterns, and now references to living for centuries. Sarah backed away from the study and returned to Emma's room, her hands shaking as she placed a cool cloth on her daughter's forehead. Everything she thought she knew about their situation was turning upside down. Adrian wasn't just a wealthy, eccentric businessman living in an inherited castle. He was something else entirely. But, even as fear crept up her spine, Sarah forced herself to think rationally. Whatever Adrian might be, he had shown nothing but kindness and protection to her family. Emma and Ethan adored him, and he clearly cared for them in return. Mrs. Rosenberg had worked for him for years and obviously felt safe and valued. If Adrian was dangerous, would he really have opened his home to a woman and 2 children? Sarah's internal debate was interrupted by a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Adrian standing in the hallway, his usual composed expression replaced by obvious concern. "Mrs. Rosenberg mentioned that Emma has a fever. Is she all right?" "It's just a cold, but her temperature spiked about an hour ago. I've been giving her fluids and trying to keep her cool. May I see her?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let him enter. Adrian approached Emma's bed with the quiet care of someone who understood sickness. He placed his hand gently on her forehead, and Sarah was startled by how cool his skin felt. "She's burning up," he murmured. "We should call Dr. Morrison." At 10 o'clock at night? I'm sure it's just a common cold. Dr. Morrison is an old friend. He won't mind. Adrian was already reaching for his phone. David? It's Adrian. I have a sick child here who needs attention. Yes, tonight. Thank you. Within 30 minutes, Dr. Morrison arrived at the castle. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and gentle hands who examined Emma thoroughly while engaging her in conversation about her favorite books. His diagnosis was indeed a common cold, but he left antibiotics as a precaution and instructions for managing her fever. Call me if her temperature goes above 102, Dr. Morrison told Sarah as he prepared to leave. But she should be much better by tomorrow. After the doctor left, Adrian lingered in Emma's room, reading her a story in his deep, soothing voice until she drifted off to sleep. Sarah found herself watching him with new eyes, noting the way he moved without making any sound, the way shadows seemed to cling to him even in the lamplight, and how his pale blue eyes seemed to almost glow in the darkness. Adrian, she said quietly as they stood outside Emma's room, can we talk? Of course. They went downstairs to the family sitting room, where Adrian poured himself a glass of what looked like red wine while Sarah chose tea. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I overheard part of your phone conversation tonight, Sarah said directly. The one where you mentioned someone named Marcus. Adrian went completely still, his wineglass frozen halfway to his lips. Sarah. I also heard you say something about centuries, and a council. I need to know what's going on, Adrian. If my children and I are living in your house, I need to know what kind of danger we might be in. Adrian set down his glass and was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. I was hoping to have more time before we had this conversation. What are you? Sarah asked, surprised by her own directness. You already know, don't you? Deep down, you've suspected for days. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to say the words. You're a vampire. Adrian nodded slowly. I am. The simple confirmation hit Sarah like a physical blow, even though she had been preparing herself for it. Everything she thought she knew about the world had just shifted on its axis. How long? I was turned in 1847. I've been what I am for over 175 years. Sarah felt dizzy. That's impossible. Is it? You've lived with me for 2 weeks, Sarah. You've seen things that didn't quite add up. I never eat during the day, I avoid direct sunlight, I'm stronger than any human should be. The signs were all there. The phone conversation tonight, who were you talking to? Adrian sighed. Other members of my kind. There is indeed a council that governs vampire society, and they're not pleased that I've brought humans to live here permanently. They consider it a security risk. And Marcus? The name you mentioned? Marcus Drackle. He's my superior, you could say. The closest thing vampires have to a king. He's the one expressing concerns about your presence here. Sarah felt hysterical laughter bubbling up inside her. My dead husband was named Marcus, and now I'm living with a vampire who answers to someone with the same name. What are the odds? Actually, Adrian said quietly, that's not a coincidence. Sarah's laughter died immediately. What do you mean? Adrian stood and began pacing, running his hands through his dark hair. Sarah, when your car broke down outside my castle, it wasn't random. Marcus Drackle has been watching your family since your husband's death. What? Sarah felt the room spinning around her. Your husband's name, combined with his battle against a terminal illness and his family's desperate situation, caught the attention of certain supernatural entities. Marcus Drackle was curious about whether there might be a connection to his own bloodline. Are you telling me that my husband was related to vampires? Not exactly. But the Drackle name has power in our world, even when it appears in human families that have no knowledge of our existence. Marcus wanted to know if your family had any latent supernatural abilities. Sarah sank into her chair, feeling like her entire reality was crumbling. So you've been studying us? Like laboratory rats? No, Adrian said firmly, crouching down in front of her chair. Sarah, I want you to understand something very clearly. I was asked to observe your family and report back to Marcus. That's true. But the moment I met you and the children, everything changed. What do you mean? I mean, I told Marcus that I found nothing of supernatural significance in your bloodline, and that your family had moved on to California to start over. I lied to the most powerful vampire in existence to protect you. Sarah stared at him. Why? Because watching you fight to protect your children, seeing the love and strength you showed in the face of impossible circumstances, made me remember what it felt like to care about someone more than myself. You and Emma and Ethan brought light into a life that had been dark for over a century. But tonight's phone call. Marcus discovered that I lied. He knows you're here, and he's demanding that I send you away immediately. And if you don't? Adrian's expression became grim. Then, he'll come here himself to deal with what he considers a security breach. Sarah felt terror clawing at her throat. What does that mean for my children? It means I won't let him near them, Adrian said with quiet intensity. Sarah, I know this is a lot to process, and I know you have every right to take your children and leave immediately. But I need you to know that as long as you're under my protection, no one will harm you or them. How can you protect us from someone you called a king? Because despite what Marcus likes to believe, I'm not just another vampire under his command. My bloodline is older than his, and my power is significant. I've chosen to work within the council structure because it maintains peace in our community, not because I have to. Sarah struggled to process everything Adrian was telling her. What about Mrs. Rosenberg? Does she know what you are? She's known for years. Her family has served mine for generations. She's human, but she's under my protection as well. So when you offered us a home, you weren't just being kind. You were making us targets. Adrian's face showed genuine anguish. Sarah, I swear to you, when I invited you to stay, I believed I had successfully misdirected Marcus's attention. I thought you would be safe here. I never intended to put you in danger. Sarah stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit mountains. Behind her, she could hear Adrian moving restlessly around the room. What happens now? She asked without turning around. That depends on what you want to do. I can arrange for you to disappear completely, new identities, financial support, relocation to anywhere in the world you want to go. You would be safe, but you would have to leave tonight. And if we stay? Then, I stand between you and Marcus, and we deal with whatever consequences come from that. Sarah turned back to face him. What do you want us to do? I want you to stay, Adrian said immediately. These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I've experienced in over a century. But I won't make that choice for you. This is about your children's safety. Sarah thought about Emma and Ethan, sleeping peacefully upstairs in their comfortable beds, already calling this place home. She thought about their new friends at school, Mrs. Rosenberg's grandmother mothering, and the security they had found after months of uncertainty. Adrian, I need you to be completely honest with me. If we stay, and this Marcus comes here, what are the chances that my children will be hurt? If he comes here, he'll have to go through me first. And, I promise you, Sarah, I would die before I let anyone harm Emma or Ethan. Something in his voice told Sarah he meant that literally. What about you? What happens to you if you defy this council? That's not your concern. Yes, it is. My children love you, Adrian. If something happened to you because of us. Nothing will happen to me, Adrian said, but Sarah could see the uncertainty in his eyes. She was quiet for a long time, weighing their options. Finally, she made her decision. We'll stay. Adrian looked surprised. Sarah. I said we'll stay. My children have been through enough upheaval. They're happy here, they're safe here, and they love you. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. You realize what you're choosing? You're choosing to trust your children's lives to a vampire. No, Sarah said firmly. I'm choosing to trust them to a man who loves them and would do anything to protect them. The vampire thing is just unusual biology. Adrian stared at her for a moment, then crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Sarah was startled by the embrace, but she found herself melting into his cool strength. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to figure out how to handle this Marcus situation. We will. Together." As Sarah stood in Adrian's arms, she realized that somewhere along the way, her feelings for him had evolved far beyond gratitude. The revelation of his true nature should have terrified her, but, instead, it explained the intensity of the connection she felt with him. Adrian wasn't just offering her family a home, he was offering them his heart and his protection, even if it meant defying the most powerful forces in his world. 3 days later, Marcus Drackle arrived at the castle. Sarah was playing with Emma and Ethan in the garden when she saw the black limousine winding up the mountain road. Adrian, who had been expecting this confrontation, met his visitor at the front door. Marcus Drackle was exactly what Sarah had expected a vampire king to look like: tall, imposing, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. But, when Adrian introduced her and the children, Marcus's expression softened slightly. "So these are the humans who have caused such a disruption in our orderly world," he said, studying Emma and Ethan with curiosity rather than menace. "They're under my protection," Adrian said firmly. "Yes, so I've heard." Marcus turned his attention to Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you aware of what your host truly is?" "Yes, sir." "And it doesn't change anything." "Interesting." Marcus smiled slightly. "And you're not afraid?" Emma, who had been hiding behind Sarah's legs, suddenly stepped forward. "Are you a vampire too?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. Marcus laughed, a sound that transformed his entire face. "I am indeed, little one. Does that frighten you?" "No," Emma said thoughtfully. "Adrian's a vampire, and he's the nicest person I know. He reads us stories and helps Mama with her work and makes sure we're safe." Marcus looked at Adrian with raised eyebrows. "Stories?" "They enjoy fairy tales before bed," Adrian said defensively. "How domestic," Marcus murmured, but there was amusement rather than criticism in his voice. The confrontation that Sarah had been dreading turned out to be far more civilized than expected. Marcus stayed for dinner, charming Emma and Ethan with stories of his travels while engaging Sarah in conversation about literature and art. By the end of the evening, it was clear that he posed no threat to their family. "I came here prepared to enforce our laws," Marcus told Adrian as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed. "But I find myself reconsidering those laws instead." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, Mrs. Mitchell, that your family has accomplished something I thought impossible. You've reminded one of our oldest and most powerful vampires what it means to be human." Marcus looked at Adrian with something approaching pride. "For that alone, you deserve our protection rather than our persecution." "So we can stay?" Sarah asked. "You can stay," Marcus confirmed. "But, more than that, your family will be under the official protection of the council. Anyone who threatens you will answer to me personally." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the castle's garden watching Adrian push Emma and Ethan on the swings he had installed near the rose garden. The children's laughter echoed off the stone walls, and Mrs. Rosenberg was preparing lunch in the kitchen. It was a perfectly ordinary moment in their extraordinary life. "No regrets?" Adrian asked as he joined her on the garden bench. "None," Sarah said honestly. "This is home now. Even knowing what I am? What our life together will mean." Sarah thought about the question seriously. Living with a vampire wasn't always easy. Adrian's need to avoid daylight limited some of their activities, and there were aspects of his world that she was still learning about. But he loved her children as if they were his own, and somewhere along the way, Sarah had realized she loved him too. "Our life is different from what I planned," she said finally. "But it's good. We're happy, we're safe, and we're loved. That's more than many people ever find." Adrian took her hand, his cool fingers intertwining with her warm ones. "I love you, Sarah. All of you." "We love you too," she replied. "Emma and Ethan have already started asking if you'll adopt them officially." "What did you tell them?" I told them we'd discuss it with you. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Being my family officially would mean they would be under vampire protection for the rest of their lives. They would be part of my world in ways that can't be undone. And they would have a father who loves them and would do anything to keep them safe. I think that's worth any complications. That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table that had become the heart of their family life, Adrian made his announcement. Emma, Ethan, your mother tells me you've been asking about adoption. Both children immediately gave him their full attention. I want you to understand that if you become my children officially, it means you'll be part of my world forever. There will be rules and responsibilities that come with being a vampire's family. Will we become vampires too? Ethan asked with the curiosity of a 5-year-old. Not unless you choose to when you're much, much older, Adrian explained. But you would be under special protection, and there are people you would need to be careful around. Emma considered this seriously. But we would still be your children? Forever and always. Then, yes, Emma said decisively. We want to be your real children. Yes. Ethan agreed enthusiastically. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched Adrian's face transform with joy and love. 6 months after that conversation, Sarah stood in the castle's chapel wearing a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of roses from their garden. Adrian waited for her at the altar, more handsome than ever in his dark suit. Emma and Ethan served as their wedding party, beaming with pride as their mother married the man they had come to love as their father. Marcus Drackle himself officiated the ceremony, pronouncing them husband and wife with genuine warmth. Mrs. Rosenberg cried happy tears, and the small gathering of vampire friends and human neighbors from the village celebrated long into the night. As Sarah danced with her new husband in the castle's great hall, she marveled at how much her life had changed since that desperate night when her car had broken down outside these walls. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked as they swayed to the music. Giving up a normal human life for all this? Sarah looked around the room at their friends and family, at Emma and Ethan dancing with Mrs. Rosenberg, at the ancient stone walls that had become home to their love story. Adrian, she said, reaching up to touch his face, I didn't give up a normal life. I found an extraordinary one. This is exactly where I belong. As if to prove her point, Emma ran over to tug on Adrian's sleeve. Papa, will you tell us a bedtime story about how Mama came to live in our castle? Adrian swept Emma up in his arms while Ethan clung to his leg, both children giggling with delight. Once upon a time, Adrian began, his eyes meeting Sarah's over Emma's head, a brave mama and her 2 precious children found their way to a magical castle on a stormy night. And they lived happily ever after. That's not a fairy tale, Papa, Emma protested. That's real. Sometimes, Sarah said, taking Ethan's hand while her other arm circled Adrian's waist, real life is the best fairy tale of all. Years later, when Emma and Ethan were grown and had children of their own, they would still return to the castle for holidays and special occasions. They would tell their own children the story of how their grandmother had sobbed on that terrible night when she thought they had lost everything, only to discover that sometimes the most frightening doors lead to the most wonderful adventures. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the mountain winds sang through the ancient stones, you could still hear the echo of children's laughter in the castle halls, and the whispered words of a vampire king who had learned that love was the greatest magic of all.